Hey,
Hi, Jeff. Thank you so much for having us
good to see you.
today.
Thanks for coming today.
Hey, it's good to see you
So,
in person.
Clay, we've met on Zoom.
Ivy.
Ivy,
Yes.
glad to have you here,
Thank
Ivy.
you. Yeah, this is so beautiful here, this location.
You know, we've been really fortunate. This location has been absolutely ideal. It's close to Silicon Valley. People come down with a short trip. They can get out of the office, and in a half hour, they're down here looking out at this instead of buildings.
Well, we're so excited to see the space today. What are we going to see?
Well, I'm going to show you everything that we have under this roof, which is, you know, a development capability, a clean room manufacture, injection molding, 3D printing, extensive capabilities, mold making. So you're going to see everything we have to offer. See how it can fit into your development project that we hopefully can facilitate for you.
Take my idea to fruition.
That's right.
Let's see what you can
That's
do.
right. So let's go take a look at the lab first, and then we'll continue through the rest.
Great.
So the important thing to note here is that I emphasize development a lot more than I say a design. There are design firms, there are manufacturing firms. Development encompasses the entire spectrum of taking things from concept on the whiteboard and all of the iterations that you go through in order to make a product become reality. Because frankly, nothing is ever right at first. Most inventors think I've got an idea, I'm basically done. It's never that easy. It takes a lot of work, even for simple products, to go from gray matter to hardware. And so in this space, we can do a lot of building of prototypes and testing of ideas. So I like to say that we're very Edisonian in our approach. Thomas Edison was brilliant, the most prodigious inventor in our history. The process is to take your best concept, design it up as best you know, build it, test it, learn from the process, and each step along the way, you iterate, and it teaches you what to do next. And that's the process of development.
So what happens in here?
So in this particular space, we develop catheter prototypes, catheters of all sorts. A lot of people laugh when they hear catheter because they only think of a urinary catheter. There are catheters of all sorts to do all sorts of wondrous things in the body. For example, just 2 years ago, I had stents put in my heart, and this is technology that I helped develop back 20 and 30 years ago. And all they do is they go in through these little holes in the wrist to access the heart to put stents in. We develop products like that. So we've built products to go in the brain, in the eyes, through all parts of the body to perform whatever therapy is needed for a specific procedure. And so we develop all sorts of things here. We've actually serviced over 500 clients. And so we've helped develop so many different things. This particular area is catheter technology. Over here we do a variety of other types of technology. In fact, we have something that I can show you. We have permission from our clients, so I'll show you something that we have set up over there in the other side of the lab.
What do we call this thing?
So yeah, Jeff, any like special capabilities here? I know you mentioned catheters, but like what sort of equipment have you had to bring in-house for these specialty projects?
Excellent question. So, I like to buy machines, by the way. So give me any excuse and I'll buy a machine. but what's important is to be able to develop things in-house. So, if we have to go outside to someone that has a specialty function in their shop, it may cost me 2 weeks, and waiting 2 weeks to get something done drives me crazy, and it drives my clients crazy because 2 weeks is very expensive. In fact, your most precious commodity is time. And so whatever we can do to facilitate a quick turn on testing and proving out ideas, we do here. So for example, I'll just grab an example. This is just an industrial piece of equipment. It's a rolling mill. Quite often we need to take wire, say stainless steel wire, and we need to make it a different shape. And so we can roll it through this and make a round wire, flat, thin, long. We can do all sorts of things. So all over the shelves here, you'll find all sorts of seemingly bizarre stuff. Because we've accumulated stuff over years and years of doing projects, the important thing there is that when an engineer or a client or a technician has an idea, we want them to be able to go into the lab and try it right now. Because if you let it go too long, they may lose it. So what's really critical is to take an idea, go into the lab and test it as quickly as possible to learn the next iteration.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of timeline, right? It's you learn immediately, you take those results, and you iterate the next one. There's not the delay of someone else doing it, or there's not the practicalities of when you're trying it on the machine, you see something that you wouldn't have seen if you outsourced it to somebody else. To have those capabilities here are huge. And I mean, I already feel pressure from our investors to meet the timeline. So when you say, hey, we care more about the timeline than anything else, I breathe a sigh of relief. Yeah.
I'm so refreshed to hear you say that, because so often our clients don't have that express experience to knowing that the quick turnaround, because like I said, quite often people will have an idea, investors have invested, and they think because they had an idea and designed something that
it's not done yet?
that they're ready to go to market.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't work that way.
My idea isn't perfect at the beginning, is that what you're saying?
We'll help you make it more perfect.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
So let me show you how the master craftsmen here, the master technicians, might go about building a catheter, and they have so much experience. These technicians are masters of their craft. They've been building catheters of all sorts for 30 years. And so when the engineers have an idea we want to implement, they're the ones that help us understand the reality of what we can and can't do. And they're the ones that build stuff. And so let me show you in closer detail. So here Tony is building a balloon catheter. What's a balloon catheter? Balloons are used a lot in the body to perform various types of therapy. Like I mentioned, I got stents put in my coronaries 2 years ago, which are deployed on a balloon, on a catheter. They go in with a very small catheter, maybe a millimeter and a half in diameter, which is a 1/16 of an inch, and they go through a little tiny poke in my wrist in the radial artery, get it into my coronaries, inflate a balloon, which places a stent, and then by deflating the balloon, they can leave the stent in place.
Like this right here is a balloon?
And this is a balloon
Wow.
on a catheter,
Wow.
and he can inflate and deflate that balloon to perform whatever therapy this product is intended for. And so every catheter is made specific to a procedure, which then gets clearance through the FDA to perform that procedure.
So obviously, this is R&D kind of space right here.
Right.
This is not going in human. This is not going probably in animal. Could you build this same catheter once you refined it here and actually build this catheter here to go into human?
Excellent question. So the process would be that here we would prove ideas, test them on a bench model, for example, in a way to see that this can deploy in the vasculature. Maybe we model it in polymer tubing, for example.
I see massive amounts of tubing. Is that
Tubing
is it what
galore,
you
tubing
required-
galore.
Yeah, acquired over the years to actually prototype and test.
Exactly.
For bench top,
And
obviously.
then once we have something that is performing adequately, then we have to go through all the rigors of testing, documentation, so that what we are then going to go into the clinic to use is done properly, following all the requirements of standards and the regulatory agencies, such as ISO standards and the FDA requirements and so on. And so yes, to answer your question, this would be to iterate ideas.
Sure.
When we have the ideas that we ultimately want to use, we would then take them into our manufacturing space to build the final product that will get used.
And you could actually do that in-house. You could take, I mean, obviously you described what it takes to get to the clinical version, but you can actually manufacture the clinical version in-house here.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that's why I'm glad you asked that question, because the important thing about what you're going to see through all this is that we take everything from concept through final product, sterile, able to go into patients, cleared through the FDA. And we have it all under this roof.
So I have a question for you. I'm like antsy to start touching this catheter, right? What is the relationship with your clients in the sense of, I'm sure you have some clients that want to just hand it off and some that want to be hands-on. How do you balance that, and like what sort of how do your engineers and your facilities work with different types of clients?
So we're very versatile. Sometimes a doctor will come in with an idea. In fact, let me have you look at the whiteboard right behind you here. Sometimes we'll have doctors come in and we'll start here, literally. What they want to achieve is get into, say, some aspect of the coronary arteries, and here, then we would start sketching out what might achieve what they want to do. And so after we know what we want to build, having brainstormed this, and brainstorming is a very important aspect of all of development, then we start here, we build it, and then we test the reality against the concept. The doctor then could come back in here, test it on the bench, see if it feels right to him, see if the balloon inflates fast enough for his application, and so on and so forth. And quite often we have doctors right here working with us elbow to elbow at the workbench, as well as clients. Another way that we work, and perhaps the other end of the spectrum, is a company who has already developed their product. They already have proven the concept where they want it, and they just want us to manufacture. They'll come in with a stack of documents and say, build this for us. In which case we then have to bring that into our system under the umbrella of our quality systems, because we are ISO certified, so we have ways that we must do things. And so we bring in their specifications and we can manufacture that. And everything in between. So do you ever do like second generation stuff where you're adding features from something that's already at market with these large suppliers? Or? Yeah, indeed. So it's very common for a product to get launched, go to market, and although engineers always think and the doctors always think their ideas are 100% and that's it, the reality is when you get it into the hands of hundreds or even thousands of actual clinical users, that's when you learn a lot more of the reality of the clinical environment and that product's use than what you can even conceive in this environment. Right. And so usually you're developing your second gen product by your second year on the market. You should be working on your next generation, or someone else is going to come along, a competitor, and do it for you and take your market away. So yes, we very often are working on second gen. Interesting. So let's go over to the other side so you can see a couple other projects. I do have permission, by the way, to show. I want to be real sensitive to confidentiality, but these are projects that we can show.
Great. And what's this here?
Oh, another thing that we do in-house is anything that requires any custom tooling or machinery, we can build machinery. In fact, I'll show you other examples of stuff that we've designed and built in-house to meet a specific manufacturing need. So this was built as a manufacturing processing machine. So the next side of the engineering R&D lab is very much like that, except we aren't doing catheters here. We're doing more mechanical, electromechanical kind of projects. And again, the important thing to see is that we have stuff that we've accumulated over time. Why is that important? Again, having materials that when an engineer has an idea or a client, you never know when an epiphany is going to come to mind and you want to test it. Case in point, we were in a brainstorming session. A client came back from Europe having performed some clinical work with a product that we developed, an ophthalmic implant. And they said everything that we developed here at Phoenix worked great, but they had used something from another company and it didn't work, so we need to solve that problem. So we were holding a brainstorming session, and in the middle of the brainstorm session, an engineer got up and said, wait a minute, I've got an idea. Give me a few minutes. And he came out here and was able to pull hypodermic tubing out of one drawer, nitinol wire out of another drawer, and Dremel tool, and he built up, and in 15 minutes he built a prototype. He came back into the meeting and said, I tested it, it works. That became the product.
That's great.
So again, the critical thing is you got to have tools to work with to facilitate the creativity. For example, yeah, good to see this. So we can do electrical development here. We have so much stuff. I mean, I know it looks like a bit of a mess. So we let this be this way, by the way. In fact, I encourage this. Why? I've worked at places that were so neat and so clean that people were afraid to use the lab.
Interesting.
I don't ever want anyone to be afraid to try an idea. So things can be a bit
Loose.
of a mess here. So here's an example for that we've been working on. It's I won't tell what it is, but you can't tell by looking at it. But this shows the kind of the development of so much of how things work. So we have components that we've purchased. We have components that we have 3D printed in-house. We have components that have been molded. And this is a product that is not yet on the market, but soon will be. And so we develop the software to do a specific function, to drive a motor, which has to perform in a certain way. And so the electromechanical work we also do in-house, which is actually pretty rare to see someone who does catheter work and electromechanical and the clinical and so on. I mean, like I said, we've serviced over 500 companies, and because I've been doing MedTech for 40 years, collectively we just have such a broad array of things we've done that one client called me, a potential client called and said, "Have you ever done such and such?" And I said, "Haven't done that, but frankly, nothing scares us anymore." And he said, "That's what we've heard about you guys." So
Jeff, I mean, I love seeing the different aspects. Like, right, it's like, okay, we're not building our motors because we can find those and source those. That's fine.
Right.
But then it's like, okay, some components are available off the shelf. Some are 3D printed. Some are molded, and you have all of these again capabilities in house. Tell me a little bit about your engineers. I mean, in the sense that, okay, yeah, you mentioned you have software capabilities. How many engineers do you have, and what are their specialties in the range of specialties they have?
So we've got, I think we're at 27 engineers now, and we have electrical engineering, we have mechanical engineering, we have actually an environmental engineer also. We've had biologists on staff. We have biomedical engineers, software. We like to have a broad spectrum of talent, and we will take anyone with a technical bent, so to speak, and we'll turn them into what we want them to be, because we do things a little bit differently here. Sure. And so what we particularly like to have is engineers who like to build stuff.
Yeah. So many times we've seen it where you have your theoretical engineers and then you have your hands-on engineers, and when it comes to actual execution and building, the hands-on engineers tend to outperform.
They do. Well, of course, through the education process, you have to understand the theory behind, physics and engineering and all those things. But the intuition that allows an engineer then to take that theory and apply it really comes from other things they've done in life. I always like to ask interviewees, I say, "What did you do when you were a kid?" And if one guy told me, I build RC planes. "Oh, you mean you buy kits and put?" No, I designed my own RC planes. I'm trying to build the ultimate RC plane that won't break when I crash it. That's an innately technical person.
Yes.
And those are the kind of people we want who just grew up building things, because they can then take the theory that they learned in school, marry it with their experience growing up building whatever, and we find those to be the best creative talents.
So it sounds like they're not afraid to try things.
I'm glad you said that, because anyone who's afraid to try something really doesn't fit here. You have an idea, you get out there and you just build it. And things that fail is not a failure. You always learn from what you did, and even failures can then teach you the next idea. "Oh, I hadn't thought of that, but it gives me a new idea." Right. And so building, testing, and failing is really important. In fact, I've had a lot of Japanese visitors, and I've spoken at Japanese conferences, and I try to help them understand that a failure is not bad. You learn from it, and they have a saying in Japan. They say, Shippawa Seiko no Moto. What is that? Failure is the foundation of success.
That's great.
And it's true. You build, if it doesn't work, it teaches you what to do next. And that's what this space is all about. Try whatever comes to mind. I actually encourage engineers to do personal projects too,
Oh, really?
because the more they're doing, the more they're thinking, and the more it facilitates creativity.
Right.
So speaking of creativity,
Yeah.
it looks like you're using a sous vide over there to hold temperature of a water bath. It's,
Are you?
Yeah, in fact, let's go over it. Now, that's one that we won't get
Confidential.
too close, but we'll describe that while we're over there.
I don't think the sous vides are confidential.
In fact, oh, by the way,
It's like
we were talking
watershed.
about collaboration.
Yeah. Hey.
So this is Kyle. He's an engineer
Nice
with
to
one
meet
of
you.
our other clients,
Oh, very cool.
and he's here.
What's your
Ivy.
name? Ivy, nice to meet you.
He's here a lot. In fact, and Oscar, you've been.
Yeah.
How much have you
Well.
been here in the last 2 weeks?
Every day.
So we're heavy collaboration.
Very cool.
And then here we have Ashby, who is working with them on this project. And while we won't describe in detail what the product is, you had asked about the test apparatus. Ashby, can you tell what you have here for a test apparatus?
Sure. So this is a heated bath with water and a little bit of glycol to simulate the blood. We're heating units up to a particular temperature, letting them dwell, and then passing them through a mock tortuous path to simulate a circulatory system.
Great. And so you can see that we didn't have to build something extremely elaborate for this. This is basically a storage tote with heating circulating units in it, whereas some labs would have spent $20,000 building an elaborate tool. We can get the same exact functionality out of stuff that we
I
can
love
find off
that.
the shelf.
Very cool.
Yeah, because clients don't want to spend unnecessarily, and so that way of testing is really important, to be able to understand the science, the physics, everything that underlies what needs to be tested, and approach it that way rather
In
than
an efficient way.
in an efficient way. Exactly. So one thing I'm trying to impress upon them, since you've been here a lot, in fact, this project's been going on for a year
and a
or
half.
so.
Yeah.
So I want them to appreciate just how closely we collaborate with clients. Again, let's not go into detail on the product, but
Sure.
if you can tell how it's been working with my engineers, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've basically, it started with a need for a very specific design feature to be designed. We didn't have capacity in-house. So we worked with Jeff through references and everything else, and we started weekly meetings, worked with their engineers. We came up with a novel solution to that design feature, and through just naturally what makes sense for the next step. Well, since he's designing and building that feature, let's design and build the assembly. Let's package it here. Let's manufacture it here, and it just grows into the full product.
So you guys had a full separate company,
Correct.
didn't have the capabilities in-house.
Correct.
Through reputation, met Jeff in Phoenix to Ventures, started to see the capabilities here, and then started moving more things from your facility in-house here.
That's right.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And how many engineers are you working with here?
We are growing internally with
Uh-huh.
at our company.
Uh-huh.
But when we started, it was 3 of us,
Uh-huh.
and now we're getting up to 25.
Wow.
So it's this past year and a half has been very good, and so that the progress that we've made on the design has obviously built confidence with our investors, and then that's allowed the team to grow.
Congratulations.
So, yeah.
Exciting.
Sounds
Yeah.
fun.
Definitely.
And theirs, I won't tell you about it, but it's an exciting product that's going to, I think, hit the market and go
off.
crazy.
Hope so.
It's going to
Hope
save
so.
lives, and that's what this is all about. We're saving lives.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so let's leave the free thinking area and move into the area that is a little more constrained. We'll come around the corner here. Now, by the way, all across the front here we have engineering offices. So these cubicles are engineering offices. These are my directors, and Bryant, who is our president, is housed over there. Our COO is out of the office today. Val is our controller. She keeps me under control.
I see you have the anatomy.
Yeah. And are
Yeah,
these
oh.
whiteboards as well?
I'm glad you pointed that out. So, what we did, whiteboards eventually, you can't erase them. So we've converted everything to glass, and so we got these posters and put them behind glass So we can use these for brainstorming. For example, we'll have doctors come in and we'll sit here and talk about anatomy. And if we're talking about a joint, we did a spine surgery procedure that comes into this joint right back here, and so we can brainstorm and we can draw all over this on what the procedure might be, with what the tools might be, and then we can actually, after we've drawn sketches of what something might be like, I won't draw that product. We can take pictures of this, we can sign this and date it and take a picture, it goes in the file.
Oh, cool.
As part of the creative process. Yeah, so these have been really, really productive to help the brainstorm process. And speaking of whiteboards, I mean, we just live by the whiteboards here. I can't communicate without a whiteboard, and so you can see when we have a sketch for a tool or a fixture or a product, we're always brainstorming ideas on the whiteboards. Now, what you're going to see here now is our production area, part of our production area. We have 3 clean rooms that we maintain at ISO class 7, which is the same as class 10,000 clean room. And we keep them certified. You can see we actually post the certifications so that people can see and so that we know how things were last time we did an inspection run and so on. Looks like everyone's at lunch right now.
So I'm sorry, Jeff.
Yeah.
My background's medical. I'm not familiar with clean rooms. Can you tell me kind of like what the different levels of clean room actually means and how that's applicable to like the device, whether it's indwelling or it's membrane contact with the skin? Like, what does that actually mean?
Excellent question. So the different levels of clean room, like I said, ISO class 7 or class 10,000.
Okay.
The 10,000 refers to the number of particulate count per cubic meter
Okay.
in the airspace
Gotcha.
of a given size. The given size, if I recall correctly, it's in the range of like 4 microns particle size, and 10,000 particles per cubic meter of airspace,
Gotcha.
which seems like a lot. To your question then, this is not cleaned by electronic standards.
Okay.
Where integrated circuits are made
Yeah.
are far, far, far cleaner than this.
Okay.
But interesting point about this is that products that are made in this clean environment, and this is the standard in the industry,
Okay.
if there is some particulate as fine as what that clean room standard requires, the body actually filters that stuff out. So you can go in with microscopic particulate on a product. Of course, everyone would like to have them absolutely clean, but microscopically, there's stuff truly you can't see it. When it's used in the body is a wonderful filter, and it takes it out of the blood and expels it in a natural way.
So you have the clean room capabilities to go into the body, as in into the veins, into the lungs, into the heart, obviously once sterilized, post-sterilization. So cleanliness as far as microparticles, done, but sterilization obviously happens
Correct.
post-assembly.
Good. Glad you asked that question. So you asked about different functions in the body. For example, everything we build in here, they're going to be disposable products like a catheter or a dental product we do in here regularly. They're disposable products that don't end up in the body. Anything that ends up in the body, an implant, has a completely different standard. Mm-hmm. We will manufacture implants. For example, we've done valves for the heart.
Wow.
We've done implants that go in the eye. We have done we performed the final manufacturing steps under a class 100 hood. Now consider that class 10,000 has 10,000 particles per cubic meter of airspace. Class 100 has 100.
Yeah.
That's 100 times cleaner, and that's where we do the final steps of that, clean it, package it, and so on. So,
Gotcha.
so depending on what the function is in the body,
Mm-hmm.
we'll use different levels of cleanliness.
And then, so obviously it sounds like you guys are doing, you said a mitral valve here, artificial heart valve
Correct.
that's made here. Is that a class 3 or a class 2 device?
That's class 3. So,
Okay.
so obviously you're familiar. Typical FDA designation of class 1, 2, and 3. A class 3 is a product with the highest risk to the patient should it fail.
Okay.
A heart valve,
Yeah, absolutely.
and so on. We've done many class 3 products. The majority of products in the market and what we do are class 2.
Okay.
We've done some class 1, but most are class 2 and some class 3. Now back to the 3 clean rooms. So our team is just coming back from lunch now. So here we do the dental product. We've made well over probably 1.5 million of these things. And then we can do catheters in the back of the room. That room over there, we isolate to anything that uses liquid silicone.
Is that glass on the, separated?
It's a soft wall. It's a vinyl material.
and it's cleaner
It's
back in there?
it's not cleaner. We segregate it because of what we do in there.
Okay.
Silicone, liquid silicone, you do not want to get anywhere else in your manufacturing facility. So we segregate anything that requires silicone in that room.
Okay.
Because when silicone gets free, it's like an alien invasion. I mean, it's
Takes
hard.
over.
It's hard to clean up and so on. So we keep all silicone work segregated to that room.
Okay.
And as you know, what happens in the clean room, you have a gowning area where you go in and you don't get out of your street civilian clothes, but you cover them with a clean barrier. Something to cover your head, hands, your body, and your feet.
Like a scrub down station before surgery.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And so you'll see the operators in there all gowned up and so on. And that's how one of the important aspects of protecting the cleanliness of the room, because if you were to walk in with your street clothes, you're bringing in pollen
Right.
from outside and stuff on your shoes and
So you
and so
said
on.
this room is a 10,000,
Class 10,000.
and is it a different room where you do the 100, or that's elsewhere?
That's elsewhere. In fact, yeah, we'll show that in the next room actually.
Okay.
So this is what we call a clean environment, but we don't certify it as a clean room. Class 8, so it's not as clean as there, and the products we manufacture here don't require the level of cleanliness.
Okay.
So we don't certify it because it's not necessary. But to your point about the where we do the class 100, now this is also a class 10,000 room, but if you look in there, you'll see a smaller hood
Yeah.
with its own HEPA filtration, positive airflow, and that is a class 100 hood.
Okay.
So operators will work from in front of there, putting their hands inside and do the assembly within that in a much cleaner environment.
Okay.
Gotcha. And then, how does that work with different projects? Because it sounds like you have multiple projects going on at a time
Yeah.
at different levels. How do you set up for manufacturing for one project? Yeah, the schedule. How does that work?
Good question. So there's a practice that is typical in the medical industry. If you're manufacturing something on a line and you complete a build and then you go to the next product to be built, you have to perform what's called a line clearance. You completely clear from the work environment anything that had to do with the previous job.
Okay.
Components, materials, documentation, everything. And it's like starting with a blank slate,
Okay.
so that then you can start the next build, bringing in now your materials, documentation, and so on for the next build. That line clearance is absolutely critical to what you do, and that's one of the ways that you certify your ISO system. ISO means International Standards Organization. Our notified body is BSI, British. I don't know what BSI stands for.
It's an acronym.
They come in to audit us annually, make sure we're following our systems, and that's one of the things that they will always check for, to see that there's evidence in the documentation that we're performing those functions.
And
So
so
that-
for the line clearance that you talk about, do you have somebody in-house that is responsible for scheduling the different companies that are going to be using, or do they communicate with one another?
We have, unfortunately you won't meet her today. Daisy Coleman is our Chief Operating Officer. Been with me for I think 8 years now. Yeah, 8 years. and worked for me at a previous company also 25 years ago. And she is amazing. She has the head for juggling
All of the
hundreds of
pieces.
things simultaneously, and then control through our MRP system. I think it's materials resource planning software. She schedules everything with the clients.
So we would be working with her for that type of.
Exactly, and weeks and even months in advance.
Okay.
She is planning and scheduling production.
Great.
And just to get an idea, what sort of production are you guys doing there as far as like quantity? Is it 10 units a month, or is it 10,000 units a month? Like what can you build? Obviously, depending on the complexity of the product. But what's your range?
When a company first starts out, quite often, if they're only doing a clinical study, for example,
Sure.
they might need 30 of something, or 100 or 200. And any medical product, when it gets on the market, you know, if in their first year on the market, if they do 10,000 procedures, they've done extremely well, because it takes a long time for a medical product to penetrate the market, right? But we have a dental product that we do about 100,000 copies a year,
Wow.
and we've done probably 1.25 million of those. We've been doing it for quite a while.
Wow.
And then we have other things that we do, you know, 500 copies every month and so on. So
Yeah, a range.
we span a broad,
From 10 to 10,000 a month. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
exactly.
Wow. What do we have here?
So this is our 3D printing area. Now 3D printing has almost become ubiquitous in industry now. There's a lot of really great things about 3D printing, and there's some challenges with 3D printing. I've been printing for a long time. I was a very early adopter. 25 years ago, I bought my first machine. Thing is, you have to keep up with the technology, because every 6 months someone rolls out a new printing technology. But printing has evolved very highly. And so I'll show you some pretty cool examples.
Yeah.
So over here we have plastics printers,
Okay.
and we have 3 different styles of printing. The original 3D printing that got some real traction, that machine over there, the orange and black machine, that's a process called fused deposition modeling. It starts with it's like weed whacker filament material, and it extrudes it and lays down a stream,
I've
kind of
seen
like
that.
a hot melt glue gun. And it lays down a road of plastic until it builds layer upon layer upon layer. And that's the process that really got some traction 25 years ago.
Right. And what do you actually use these 3D printers for daily?
So every time there's an idea, sometimes you build a prototype just from tubing and wire,
Right.
Available.
right? But there comes a time on almost every design when you need to actually have hardware designed, ready to be assembled into something more complex. And so we'll take the CAD, computer-aided design models, which is another great development in the last 30 years, is the CAD software facilitates the design so that the engineer is taking the idea, modeling what they want a component and an assembly to be like. And then we take those files, run them through other software that converts that file to a code
For these.
that these machines can read
And what's that turnaround time from when the machine receives the
daily.
Daily. Within the day?
Perfect example. In fact, let me introduce you to one of our engineers. So Jordan is our we've dubbed her the queen of printing. So here's something, for example, the question Ivy just asked is how long does it take to do this? So when did you actually get the file for these parts?
Last night.
So last night, and we come in this morning, and what do we have? We have components
Saved you some work.
grown in plastic
Uh-huh.
through a laser light curing the liquid resin,
Which is in there.
which is in there.
Wow.
And these
cool.
machines grow upside down in the vertical axis like so. And then you see all this kind of scaffolding. It looks like a
Yeah, like a roller coaster.
like a roller coaster. and then now she'll put it into the washing system.
Choose the next one or somewhere else?
That's another machine. These like a little washing machine, and then break off the support material, leaving just the components behind. So this is one type of printing, but like I said, ultimately, so little history. That type of machine was the type that I bought first 25 years ago. It cost $130,000.
Wow.
That machine cost $2,000, right?
Wow.
Did we buy?
Yeah.
And these machines are now hundreds of dollars,
Amazing.
hundreds of dollars
Yep.
from Amazon to print precision, detailed components.
So long as you have the software.
As long,
To-
well, yeah, and the software comes all with it.
So I can see this being great for iteration, prototyping. What else would you use 3D printing for? So I mean, obviously this is not going to be for large scale production. What's another example that like 3D printing is critical for what you guys are doing?
Well, this is how we prove out our designs.
Sure.
So every design that we have done the CAD work on, the computer-aided design work on,
Yeah.
we grow it to see if it fits together the way we thought. And once we have it looking the way we want, and it fits together the way we want,
That would be.
and
from
that
brainstorm
process
to-
exactly. So daily we can turn around iterations. If by the end of the day the engineer assembles this and says, I don't like the way this feels, or this doesn't assemble right, he can make a small tweak and tomorrow have the next iteration.
Say something about for manufacturing. Like you could build a single assembly for manufacturing. You can, it's like that's the main thing. It's like, okay, if I just need something to manufacture, or even like a test kit, like right, where it's like you only need one off. So it's great for prototyping, but it's also great for manufacturing. Yeah, well, manufacturing and testing assemblies that you maybe only need to use once, or you need one of, but it's a specialty part.
Say we could also.
So the beauty of this of printing is that you can test your ideas readily. You can use them for show and tell when you're going to investors. Instead of just saying, imagine if you will, you can hand them hardware.
Yeah.
And hardware will land an investment much more than waving your arms
Yeah, it's
and showing them numbers, right? And so this is to prove out your ideas, to see if the aesthetics are what you thought they were going to be. Because it's one thing to draw on, it's quite another thing to have hardware in hand to see how it looks. And then to move towards production is really important, because once you have all the components interacting in an assembly the way you want, and then the whole assembly, as you saw in the lab,
Sure.
completely working, then we could take the designs and make injection molds to make production quantities,
Gotcha.
which we'll get there in a little bit on tour, because we do that also. But printing has become integral and absolutely necessary to today's engineering process. So let me show you something else that's just way cool, so you get a sense for how this digital technology is so incredible. Here's a model of a heart. So the engineers took this model from online. You can get 3D scans of a heart model,
So a real patient's heart.
which came from a CAT scan.
Yep.
It's a data cloud
Sure.
of all the data points, and then we can take that and through the software turn it into. So you can see the support material, but turn around here so you can see
Yeah.
the structure of the aorta coming over here,
Yep.
the various major vessels, the coronary arteries, and so on.
It's so
So
cool.
these are the support materials, and this is the actual. Is it like a plastic?
Correct. In fact, why don't you touch it?
I can't.
So-
I don't want to get. Yeah. So it's fine.
yeah. So that's all.
Can I see?
That's all
You
different
wanna-
I want to see.
different types of plastic. And this one is a pliable plastic,
Okay.
not quite like rubber, but
Soft.
softer.
And what are they going to use this for?
I don't know. What are you using this one for?
Oh, amazing.
For testing of a catheter insertion.
Okay.
So you're actually going to stick catheter through there.
The size.
Are the coronary arteries actually hollow?
The whole heart is hollow.
Yeah.
And then, so all of these are.
Uh-huh.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Cool stuff, huh?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Don't you want to go be an engineer now?
I know.
So, good timing.
Okay.
I want to introduce you to some visitors. They're out here looking to see if we can do work for them. This is Clay and Ivy.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Frank, great to meet you.
Clay, nice to meet you.
Ivy, nice to
Frank,
meet you.
great to meet you. Nice to
So
meet you.
just so you understand our organization, Bryant is our president and chief product officer.
Okay.
I'm CEO and chairman. He's been with us 10 months now, and I'm in the process of handing more and more responsibility to him. So we've been through everything through R&D so far and describing the clean rooms. And we walked in and Ivy went, whoa, what's this stuff? And so we're going through the printing area now.
Okay.
In fact,
Have
I
you
was
gotten
asking
to
about
the,
this.
to the fuse?
we haven't done the fuse yet. You want to go describe that one?
Yeah. So this is the fuse. We got this printer about a year ago, and it became quickly our favorite tool. It's a powder printer. It prints nylon 12, and so this is one of the pieces here. Yep. Just like any 3D printer, it helps us iterate really fast.
And
But
is this also plastic?
it's
or-
also plastic.
Yep.
It's nylon. Yeah.
I don't see any supports.
That's exactly the thing that we love about this is it's powder based, and so you pack up this box about like that, and you don't need any support material. You can put it in any orientation, and you can put an entire device, even to the extent of if you wanted to build, say, a transmission that has all its gears and everything functioning, but close it off, you can do that. You can't service it, but you can actually design and print something like that. As long as you can get the powder out, you can.
So you just have to be able to blow the powder out.
All you have to do is blow the powder out. Yep.
Interesting.
It's a two-step process. We're doing the print. We run it overnight, starting usually about 3 o'clock. So this is finishing up from last night. Sometimes we'll do a longer build. And so this will run overnight, and we'll put in 3 or 4 different projects. And because we don't have to do support material, we can pack it in super tight, so it's really efficient. And then we bring it over to the processing station, and the parts will go in here. They get ejected up and out. And
Oh, really?
yeah, and usually an engineer will go through and clean up the parts a little bit, blow them off, and it actually allows us to reuse the powder, so we don't have to throw it away. So it's a very efficient system. So we just finished off a new batch of powder there, so it's mixing that up, getting ready to reload for tonight.
Very cool.
Wow.
And I heard you say that you'll do multiple products
Yeah.
on one print.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's like a setup fee or something. You know, it's time consuming, so you can spread that out amongst your clients.
Correct.
And
So
then
we
cost
so we
different,
charge on a time to build process plus setup. In fact, you can see if you want to look closely on the screen, you can see how all the components
Oh, it's a
are organized in such a way that the chamber can build vertically, and you see the blue
Yeah, where it
plane
is.
is growing like this, showing where they are in the build.
That's really cool.
So
Amazing.
this has become our favorite machine because it is so productive, and because it's building in nylon, the parts
Yeah.
are tough, durable.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a very different process than the resin printers that we have over there. And each one of them has their pluses and minuses.
Sure.
Okay.
So, have you had a chance to look at the resin printers?
Yeah, we were looking over there.
Great. Yeah. It's amazing how the technology has evolved. How the orange printers were $5,000–6,000. That technology is now at the $600 class. I mean,
Yeah.
Amazing.
yeah.
So in order to make some of the high performing catheters today,
Okay. Look at that.
this process is really fascinating. It's called braiding.
Okay.
Just
What's
like
the
doing a
material?
French braid on your hair,
Yeah,
but
I
in
need
this
this for
case,
my daughter.
Is it wires?
these are wires.
Okay.
Stainless steel wire that's braiding, just like doing a French braid in your hair, but there's 16
Okay.
carriers, and so the carriers are weaving in and out and in and out, creating a braid
Onto that?
onto a shaft,
Okay.
which then turns into a catheter shaft.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Now, why is that important? Mechanically speaking, the catheter has to have all sorts of properties depending on where they're going in the body. For example, it has to be stiff to be able to push it. We call it pushability.
Yeah.
Very technical
Brilliant.
term. So the ability of a catheter to be pushed, but then it has to be flexible to turn the corners and get into parts of the body. For example, the coronaries, those were a very tortuous path to go up over the aortic arch and into the coronary arteries to perform a therapy.
Very
It's even more so in the brain, where the vasculature of the brain is extremely complex and tortuous, and sticking something in the brain requires a much finer device.
Yeah.
And so we braid and put different properties, different mechanical properties at different positions on a shaft by changing the way they're braided.
Interesting.
And so, but this process is pretty fascinating. Tony is, again, he's one of our master
catheter
craftsmen.
master, yes.
He can braid anything.
All right.
And so
I have an 8-year-old daughter that needs your attention.
So this whole machine is just for the braiding?
this is just for the braiding. And what you see come out of this, do we have a braided shaft here that we can show?
Sorry, Jeff, while we're waiting on him, did you purchase this equipment for a specific client, or is this something you knew
we did.
You didn't, right?
Well,
And now use it for everyone?
we need this generally, but we did buy it for one product.
Okay.
And that's where things usually go. If a product needs a specific technology, I'll acquire it, bring it in,
Yep, and you know you'll use it
and
later.
then we have it. Correct.
So
Interesting.
there's the,
So what does all this mean? So here we have a catheter shaft. It's not a complete catheter yet, but it's a subassembly. So this is very flexible, but it's stiff so that I can push it.
yeah.
But I can also torque it, meaning I can turn this thing
Oh, wow.
and it will turn up
Really?
here by turning the back end
That's crazy.
in what we call a
Look at that.
1-to-1 ratio. It has
Wow.
very high degree of controllability, and in this case, Tony, why don't you pull the wires? Tony built into this the ability of this catheter to be steered through the body
So he's pulling one of the.
by
This is why we losing.
by deflecting the end, and we're just doing that by hand now. Instead of, there's not a controller on the
Sure,
end.
but if you had a controller,
If we had a controller, then
absolutely.
but by being able to deflect this, we can steer it to whatever part of the body it needs to get into
That's
to produce a therapeutic effect.
Is this braiding always the same, or can you actually program the braid to get different?
Excellent question. Yes, we program different density of the braid
Go ahead.
in order to get different effects. Sometimes we want a stiffer shaft. Sometimes we want somewhere along the catheter it wants to go from stiff to
And
soft.
you can change it.
We can change
Wow.
it along
Sure.
along the shaft.
So you could have pushability for the 90% of it, and then steerability for that last 10%.
Correct.
And is he inputting a software to this?
Correct. So the controller here allows him to put in all the parameters that allows him to make a catheter shaft with whatever mechanical properties are required. So the next step in making catheter shafts, like you just saw, is after we have the braided onto a shaft with a what's called a liner. There's an inner polymer liner, a thin plastic tube.
Okay.
It comes over here, and we do lamination. Now, this can either be done in an oven, but we get much better control with this kind of a heat process. So you see the catheter shaft on a mandrel.
Okay.
The heat cycle, this thing travels down. Is this traveling now, Tony?
Yeah.
So it's actually, yeah, here we go.
it is.
So here's the motor position and the temperature on,
Oh
so,
my goodness, that's
so this has 4 stations, and this is moving and shrinking because we put then a heat shrink layer over this, and this machine is shrinking the layer onto it.
Okay.
So this is how catheter shafts are made around the world.
So sorry, I just noticed something. When we were talking to, I believe it was Ryan, one of the 3D parts was actually that part. So this is a machine that you guys built. This is not something you purchased. This is something you built.
Oh, good point. Yes, we designed to build these machines.
Oh,
And you see
wow.
we've got 3 of these things.
Yeah, it's insane.
So this is a custom machine that we built in-house.
Wow.
And to the point of the 3D printing, where does that come in handy? Well,
Yeah.
that's a very complex part, and we grow them here.
Ryan actually showed it to us when you weren't there.
Cool.
Exactly what it does. How it had the
very-
gas flow, the heater, and he said, "Oh, it's for making catheters." And I just happened to recognize it.
Yeah.
So this is a
The
specialty
opportunity that-
device.
Yeah. So again, the idea of keeping everything in-house,
Yeah.
the fact that we do it all here is what we're about.
Very cool. Awesome.
So I know we do need to move along, but thank you, Tony, for showing us this.
Thank you.
So another thing that we do here, for example, in this space, we do a variety of things. So this is a general purpose area. obviously the catheter shafts, but we also do electronic manufacture here. This is a product that we make, 500 to 1,000 copies a month for it's a blood monitoring system. So we do this here as well. Sometimes this space is used for assembly, sometimes it's packaging. Right now you can see they're packaging product to ship out. And because it's a large open space, we can reconfigure the space however we do. I like things to be mobile and flexible so we can change things around whenever necessary.
Similar to your clean rooms, it looks modular in there, where you can bring in one project and then go to the next.
Yeah.
This has the same feel.
I mean, we're servicing a lot of different clients, and so we often need to be rearranging and moving things around.
Interesting.
Let's go on to injection molding. The typical process back, 20, 25 years ago, it could take 4 months, 5 months to get an injection mold made.
Wow.
Because they're very, very complex. And then you get it in and realize, oh no, we didn't include this design feature. So I've always been working at ways to do rapid molding, and so part of that is having molding in-house. So from day one, I've had molding in-house. So now we have a dozen machines in here and 2 machines we use just for engineering purpose. But we'll do a lot of low quantity work. As you see, Tony is, hey Tony,
Yes.
say hi to my visitors.
Hi, Tony.
So Tony now is molding a part. In this case, it's a hand operation.
Okay.
It's often the case that when a product is first introduced to market, their quantities don't justify the cost of an automated tool. So we'll make a mold that we can pull core pins and so on by hand.
Sure.
And yes, the components are expensive, but the mold to automate that process could be a $150,000 mold.
Sure.
But the way we make a mold like this, maybe it was a $25,000 mold, and it gets them into production.
Sure. Improves the market. You can improve the market, and you can reduce costs with automation.
Exactly. So we do a lot of this kind of handwork. So the machines we have, for example, we have machines ranging from these small guys. These are 12-ton machines to 110 ton. Now, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Without getting into what that means to a machine, it means we're going to do parts that are as small as,
Okay.
like Pop Rocks. Remember the candy? As small as that, to parts that are about like 8-inch square,
Okay.
depending on the type of plastic that's used. And all these machines have different characteristics which make them ideal for shooting smaller or larger parts or different types of plastics and so on.
So, what have you seen as far as it feels like there's accountability between your engineers and in the manufacturing? There's a direct line of communication. You've seen that speeds things up, increases the actual quality of the product?
Excellent question, and in fact, I hadn't even thought about that when you say accountability. So, when we build a mold and then shoot the parts here, the engineer is right on site. Quite often we actually have clients here on the first day that we shoot their parts because they want to test the parts and see if their design even fits together. And so there have been times when we have actually, fit parts together and find, oh no, this doesn't fit quite right. We need this to be tighter by 5/1000ths of an inch or whatever. We can take the tool right into the shop, make a modification to the tool, and come shoot it again the same day.
So engineer, client, and manufacturer could all be in the same set at the same time?
Yep. Now things don't always work that ideally, but
Sure.
that's the possibility, and we have done that. We also have pad printing in-house, which is in the back of the space here, so we can print. We can print identification on. In fact, let's walk over this way, so I'll show you that. So on these parts, you see some text, some font. It says Flex specifically. So we pad printed that on these components. You take ink and you transfer the image from a plate to this, and that's how, whenever you see plastic, you're going to be spoiled now. Every time you ever see plastic parts, you're going to be looking at certain features because now you see how these things are made.
And it looks like it's actually printed on a curved material, so it's not just a flat print. You can actually print on curved material. Is that what I'm saying?
You've got good eyes. Yes, this is printed on a curved surface. And that's the cool thing about the way pad printing works. It's a silicone pad that transfers the ink onto whatever surface, and it can conform to surfaces.
Interesting.
We do a lot of overmolding also, by the way. No, I can't show you in detail on that. So, but I'll just describe. Overmolding is molding plastic onto something else. Sometimes it's a hypodermic tube, sometimes it's a stainless steel shaft, sometimes it's another plastic tube, so that we take a component, put it in the machine, the mold closes on it, it shoots plastic around it, so when we take it out of the mold, it's got plastic molded onto whatever that original component is. Most molders don't like to do overmolding. We like to accommodate our customers, so we do.
And that's all in-house?
That's all in-house, right here.
Very cool.
So let's go through to
More toys.
more toys. Oh, I should say that materials. People often ask what plastics can you do, but we shoot all of the common engineering plastics. Everything from elastomers, which are very soft, pliable, to much more rigid, high strength materials like Ultem, polycarbonate, and so on. Polyolefins, which are polyethylene, polypropylene. I mean, we really span the entire spectrum. So if your product is going to require some rigid components, some softer components, we do it all.
You've got it covered.
Yeah. So let's go into the machine shop. So we make molds in several different levels. We found it's more efficient for us to focus our mold making capability, which I'll show you in a little bit, on the engineering cycle. And then when it gets to the point where we are building some quantity of product, we'll send out, because we have good shops in Taiwan that we use for production molds, because they consume a huge amount of resource to build production tools. So if you look at molds like this, for example, these are very complex. And I'll show you one mold that's pulled open in the shop. But each time you're making a mold, it's like a custom V8 engine.
Wow.
Very complex. A lot of work goes into this, and so we send production mold like this to outside sources so that I can preserve my internal resources for building engineering and prototype molds.
Okay.
And I'll show you what I mean by that in a bit. So I mentioned the complexity of a mold. This mold is very involved. It makes two shots at a time, two parts at a time, and it's basically shaped like a gun. A plastic instrument that's used in surgery. This is what it takes to make those components in production.
Wow.
And this thing, when it's all assembled, this is only half the mold.
Okay.
Yeah.
This mold weighs like 2,500 pounds.
Wow.
And so those machines have to be able to cycle this thing, take plastic, melt it, squirt it under extreme high pressure into the mold.
Is that a pin?
That's a core pin from inside the handle.
Where?
Yeah. This guy right here.
Yeah, this guy here. These are pins that slide into the mold, and then plastic is molded around those pins. Pins are then extracted hydraulically, leaving the parts free to then come out of the mold.
And I'm sorry, Jeff, you guys built this mold here, or is this
This one we had done in
Taiwan.
Taiwan.
Taiwan, just the labor and
You know,
kind of designed it here, tested prototype here, and then for large scale manufacturing for hours spent sent it to Taiwan.
Correct.
Then they send it back here.
We can do all this stuff.
Yeah, but why would you pay for that?
For me to use my more expensive resources here and limited resources, it would take my shop a month to build this or more.
Yeah.
But if I go to Taiwan, yes, they're going to take a while to build it.
Yeah.
But because we've already done the prototyping and so on, I can then put my team back on doing the next project while this is being, because there's got to be 500,000 mold makers in Taiwan.
Yeah, we're paying for your brains and then not your brawn, and we're
Well,
using the
what's
brawn where it's cheaper.
But what's the delay been with? I know there's been a lot of delay with resources that are overseas. Have you seen that?
You know, for the mold making, there haven't been significant delays. What we do see delays in is plastic raw material and things like that are delayed significantly. Yeah, it's been kind of painful.
Real.
But you know, to get this mold made, this mold probably took 3 months to get it here from Taiwan.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's like building
do
a
you do?
custom V8 engine. You know, I've been doing this for a long time, and I was always keen on cutting that lead time to get molds made sooner. So everywhere I've been, I had injection molding, because I've been in the startup industry. I've been with several startups prior to starting this 20 years ago. And I'm always looking a way to get a mold faster. So what we've been doing, and others are doing this also, I didn't originate this, but I was very early on in doing this.
Follower.
But making a mold like this that we 3D print in plastic allows us to shoot, you know, 20 or 50 or 100 parts and then throw the mold away.
Me too.
And that is a mold that can be grown, 3D printed overnight.
And sorry, so how much would, if you guys wanted to print a mold so I could get materials that we could 3D print in, how much would that cost to print that mold? In plastic?
You know, we typically do, because it includes the engineering cycle as
Sure.
well, but typically like $2,500.
Wow.
And you've got parts.
Parts next day.
Yeah.
What's going on over here? I'm curious.
So that's
The green liquid.
good. I'm glad you asked that. We'll get there in just a minute. Good. Good you noticed.
Yeah.
So this process has limitations on what materials you can do and the complexity of a component. Because these molds don't hold up. They shatter and they're plastic. But we can print in metal. So for example, this is a printed mold insert, and I'll show you an example of what I mean by mold insert in a minute. So this was printed, this was printed, this is printed, and we can print inserts in metal as well as the plastic, depending on the requirement. So here's a component that we've actually had this product in manufacture for, I think, 13 years.
Wow.
And we prototyped with an insert like this. When it got into production, we printed this. Here's another printed mold, but then with different levels of tooling depending on your budget and your timing and the technical demands of the mold, we've got 5 different ways to make a mold. Funny story, here's a strain relief. Did for a company, back in the garage days. An engineer called and said, Jeff, I need a mold for a strain relief. And so I said, I'll have that for you next Wednesday. So it was a relatively simple mold. I shot him parts in 5 different materials so we could test how the material worked.
Sure.
3 months later, purchasing department called and said, Jeff, I need a lot of parts. I said, how many is a lot? 750. Oh, nothing. We'll have those for you next week. So I mold those back in the garage days. And then they called and said, I need 15,000 parts. So this is all pulling by hand.
Wow.
I'm in the middle of a 15,000 part run, and she said, I need 100,000 parts now. So I said, wait a minute, time out.
You got me.
I'm gonna make you a new mold on my nickel. I made him a 4-cavity mold, but still hand operated.
Okay.
And we pulled 115,000 parts by hand
Out of
Wow.
your garage.
out of the garage. We outgrew the garage, and that's why we're now in 40,000 feet with what do we have? We have 60 people total and so on. But anyway, I'll get to that in a minute. I haven't forgotten.
Okay.
But that insert turned into this mold,
Okay.
which is an 8-cavity mold.
Yeah.
So every shot coming out of the molding press, we get 8 components every like 20 seconds.
Oh, wow.
So this is one that we've done probably 2.5 million parts out of this mold.
Wow.
And so now it's out for getting service. You know, periodically you have to service it just like your car. You take it in for servicing, right?
Sure.
So we pull it out and then service the mold when necessary. And so that's the process. And here's here's the core that was pulled out of this that they're servicing.
Okay.
So that's the internal configuration of the part. This is the external configuration of the part, made in reverse. So when you put it together, oh, and look, there's the part that comes out of it.
Okay.
2.5 million of them.
2.5 million?
Do you shake when you pick this up after hand pulling 115,000?
Yes.
Yeah, we,
Actually.
yeah. There's a time to do hand pulls, there's a time not to do hand pulls.
Sure.
So the process for making molds, we can grow molds. We can also manufacture them in the traditional sense. We got CNC machines. CNC is computer numerical control. We can take the part as designed. The mold makers actually design the mold. So they do it from soup to nuts. They design the mold and build the mold. So back to the accountability. They are accountable for making their molds that work.
Sure.
And then the engineer right there with them. So they will design the mold, machine the components that go into making this mold, and part of that process requires this machine. So this is called an EDM machine. That's electrical discharge
getting
machining.
close.
Oh, you can just don't inhale this.
Yeah.
So this is what's called, like I said, electrical discharge machining, EDM. The way this works is sometimes there are shapes that you can't cut in a traditional machining operation. So what we do is we then machine an electrode. The electrodes are sometimes made in graphite and sometimes in copper. And we'll make the reverse of the shape for the mold. And then this burns with a high frequency discharge. It's like zillions of lightning bolts eroding the metal out of the mold to create a feature in a mold that we can't cut. And so you actually hear that thing and you see the sparking taking place. And those are the zillions of little lightning bolts. Every one of those is creating a particle of eroded metal, which is then just flushing out with the fluid. And so the end result is a shape that we just couldn't have manufactured through other processes.
And why wouldn't you just 3D print that?
Some things are best suited to 3D printing. For example, Ryan showed you the Sodic machine. That can also machine. I used to have two of this type of machine. I got rid of one because of that. Because that particularly is good with features that are deep and narrow, which we would have had to burn. And so having that machine allowed me to sell my other EDM machine.
Gotcha.
So again,
So
printed.
you know what's best.
Yeah, every tool used in its proper place facilitates getting so many different things
The
done.
right tool for the right job.
Yeah, and like I said, give me an excuse to buy a machine. I'll take it. So again, this is really a critical space, and so all of our tool makers we've actually trained up in-house because traditional mold making has kind of gone away. Before the days of CNC, mold making was the ultimate machining skill. Frankly, I think it still is, but it's different than other machining skills. So these guys all grew up using computers, right? And so I can take a young guy who's mechanically inclined, who grew up with a computer, train them to be a mold maker easier than I can take an old school mold maker and train them to use computers.
So you mentioned before you have 27 engineers.
27 engineers.
in-house.
And a
Mold makers,
total of 60 employees.
60 employees. And then so you have machinists, obviously, in here. How is that distributed? That's obviously manufacturing. How's that
So we
work?
got 27 engineers. Our production crew is, including materials management, is about 15 people, and then we got the quality group, which is 3 in total of 5 in quality control.
Okay.
And then the shop is 4 people full-time, and then the management staff.
Gotcha.
And the management staff, you know, I'm an engineer by education. I also went to business school, and Bryant, who you met, is a physicist by education who moved into engineering halfway through his career and so on. Daisy came from materials management and is now the COO, Chief Operating Officer, which allows her to then manage all of the ongoing operations of taking things from R&D and producing thousands or millions of products. And then my director of quality, who you haven't met, has been in quality control for 20 odd years, and he's a total ace. I mean, he was a lucky find for us.
Great.
We aren't going to make it back over that building in your time constraints. So next time you'll meet him. When your project gets up and going, certainly he'll be integral to your project. So one thing, speaking of collaborative mentality, this area right here with this is our smaller conference room, but this conference room and these cubicles we make available for clients to come and use when they need to come and park for a while.
Okay.
So if they're here for a week, they've got a place to work in the conference room to use and so on. So
that's great.
That works out really conveniently. So that is pretty much it. Any other questions come to mind that I haven't answered?
As a client of Phoenix, what type of relationships do you have in the industry that we could benefit from?
Excellent question. Business is about relationships, and one thing that's really critical to us is our reputation and the relationships we have with our clients. We have never actively marketed or had a sales effort going on. All of our growth has been organic through word of mouth referrals, and so those relationships is what allows that to happen. So when a client comes in and we work with them, what invariably happens, someone comes in and says, I only need to do some small thing, and then when they come in and see everything that we do, and then they see how we operate, within a matter of a couple months they have a lot more to bring in. So
that's what Kyle said. I mean, when we met Kyle doing the
good point.
That's exactly what he said. I came in for one small task, and then it's grown up, and now we're moving all of our resources over here.
That came in looking for a designer to manufacture just one little component. So those relationships are critical to everything we do, and so we really try to go out of our way to make sure that clients are happy and they recognize that those relationships work, and that our connections in industry are going to facilitate their success, because as we say, their success is our success. On a rare occasion, we find that a client really isn't a fit. Sometimes it's because the technology isn't a fit for us. But sometimes, on rare occasion, there's a client that personality just isn't a fit. And in 20 years, we've had, I think, 8 occasions when that happened, when the personality just didn't jive, and so it didn't work out.
Out of how many though?
Out of 500 clients we serve. So we try to have that not happen, but sometimes it does. But that's an excellent question. The relationship is everything.
And you had talked about you wanting to expand in Salt Lake and in Denver.
Correct. Actually, we're committing to those leases even as we speak.
That's exciting. And then for here, I love seeing all the apartments, and as a client, there's a comfort that comes in seeing the collaboration that can happen between all of these different departments. I'm curious your vision for this space. Is there another department that you would want to add to see more quality collaboration? What's the vision for this?
Every year I evaluate in my mind whether I want to bring tubing manufacture in-house, extrusion capability. We've got good relationships with some extrusion houses outside, so we get good results and good turnaround on tubing. But having extrusion in-house could facilitate the development effort all the more. So that's something I toy with every year as I'm doing my taxes.
Sure.
So I mean, we've seen it, that, as far as like all of the capabilities that you have, and I'd say it's like the continuation of quality between R&D to development to manufacturing and obviously building. But like outsourcing, I mean, obviously you can't be a jack of all trades. You mentioned quality tubing. Like, how do you leverage like Silicon Valley for outsourcing things that you don't have the technical capabilities here, right? You don't want to be able to do it all.
It's relatively rare that we job anything out.
Really?
Yeah, because I like doing new stuff. And so, we developed electropolishing in-house at a prototype level. We developed chem etching in-house, again, at a small level, but when we have to ramp it up, I go outside because I can't do everything. As much as I want to claim to, I just can't. So when things exceed our capacity, we'll go out. Or if there is a specific technology that I just don't have, then I'll go out. And of course, Silicon Valley is, the tech center for the world, right? But we'll go out when we must, but we try not to.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Well, it's great to meet you. Thanks for coming by. I love to show off our
Absolute pleasure.
we call it a toolbox or sometimes toy box.
I could definitely see both.
Yeah.
But it's all the infrastructure that you'd ever want without having to create it yourself.
Yeah, and I love what we do, and we love servicing customers with clever products. So
Very impressive.
hopefully we can continue working with you.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah,
Thanks for
absolute
coming.
pleasure.